I would like to call together the Tuesday, January 11th, 2022 meeting of the Commission for Historical and Architectural Preservation. As usual in these events, Eric, will you please call the roll to confirm we have a quorum?
Sure will. Chairman Liebel.
Present.
Commissioner Powell.
Present.
Commissioner Bryant.
Present.
Commissioner Dennis.
Present.
Commissioner Penza.
Present.
Councilman Bullock. Does anybody see Councilman Bullock?
I did not see him listed.
I'm going to mark him as absent. Commissioner Renan.
Present.
Commissioner Mosca. I'm going to mark him as absent. Commissioner French.
Present.
And Commissioner Edwards.
Present.
All right. As we have a quorum, we may go ahead and proceed with our meeting. At 1 o'clock, we can also get started here. So with that, our first item of business is to approve the meeting minutes from our Tuesday, December 14th hearing. Commissioners, you have received these meeting minutes previously. I assume you've reviewed them. Are there any adjustments or corrections to the record? And if not, may I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve the meeting minutes. This is Commissioner Renan.
A motion to approve. Do I have a second? I heard someone second back there. I couldn't hear who it was.
I will second. I don't think it was me that you heard, but this is Commissioner Edwards.
We have a second for Commissioner Edwards. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye when Eric calls your name.
All right. Commissioner Powell.
Aye.
Commissioner Bryant.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Penza.
Aye.
Commissioner Renan.
Aye.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
And Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
The motion carries. The meeting minutes are approved. And now moving on, we have one topic on our agenda today. That is 600 North Howard Street in the Mount Vernon Historic District. The proposals for final review to renovate the historic building and add a 2-story vertical addition. The applicant is Blank Slate LLC, and the staff reviewers are Anthony Stewart and Caitlin Audette. Anthony and Caitlin, please take it away.
Good morning. This is Anthony Stewart. Next slide, please. This is 600 North Howard Street in Mount Vernon Historical District. Shaded there in blue. Next slide. Mount Vernon Historical District encompasses roughly 40 blocks surrounding Mount Vernon Police. Contributing buildings within this district include diversity of styles, including building types, including mansions, apartments, offices, religious structures. This period of significance in Mount Vernon Historic District extends from 1810 to 1945. Next slide, please. Built in 1915, 600 North Howard Street. It's a 3-story building with a full basement located in the northwest corner of North Howard Street and Druid Hill Avenue, Baltimore City, directly adjacent from the storage facility, 602 North Howard. Next slide. The building fronts Howard Street to the east with its first floor commercial space that has a long been vacant and closed with plywood and concrete block. It is unclear if the historic fabric extent at the north face save I apologize. Store face saves the mosaic tiles and reserves to the north. The east elevation is finished with tan brick that includes rows of 4 windows and a second and third floor. The windows are separated by metal plasters and the floors are separated by spandrels that is currently missing. All the windows have been removed and infilled with plywood. The front elevation is capped by a decorative metal cornice. Next slide, please. The south elevation faces Druid Hill Avenue and Howard Street. The dog park beyond the elevation is composed of 12 bays defined by segmentally arched windows, openings, and roll-lock sills. The first floor windows vary in size as they are defined by the topography that rises towards the west. Next slide. One on the first floor, there's an opening that's been modified with a door. The metal cornice is also wrapped around the entire building. In the south elevation, next slide. And the 3-bay rear west elevation faces Linden Avenue and Alley. The rear elevation is more utilitarian in nature with common brick and stucco. The northernmost bay extends above the roof line, and the location of the service elevator has been since removed. Next slide, please. It's just another perspective view from the southeast. Next slide. Applicant provided interior shots of kind of the building, just to get a look inside there. It was completely gutted by the previous owner, and that's what's left, as you can see, is just kind of rotted joist and damaged subflooring, which will be removed. The next slide is a Sanborn map from the 1920s. And next slide is, so in 2014, CHAP staff issued an ATP to remove and replace the roof. November 2021, the current applicant submitted a plan to rehabilitate the historic building and construct a 2-story vertical addition. The commission made a motion to approve the staff recommendation for conditional conception approval with the following conditions and the final design returned to full commission. So CHAP noted conditions of the cornice on the 4th floor be removed and the cornice on the 5th floor be simplified. Explore alternative materials. New materials are used, including the entry and historic storefront and the vertical additions. Modify the proposal of the historic storefront to be more compatible with the historic building. And consider relocating the amenity space to the location to allow larger openings in the front window. And modify the southern entrance to reduce the impact of historic openings. So the next slide. Next slide, please. This is a diagram of it being the new building being coming in. Next slide. Site plan. Next slide, please. This is the new design perspective view. Next slide. Diagram of the interior spaces. Next slide. Here's the basement level. Next slide, please. Level 1. Typical floor plan. Slide. And the roof plan. Next slide. This is the south elevation. The next slide. Redesigned east elevation and the west elevation. So next slide, please. Staff has applied 1.1, identifying and preserving building historic fabric. As you can see, it's identifying the characteristics, defining features when considering these changes with historic buildings, retain character defining features such as roof shapes, opening doors, and windows, and replace missing architectural features and new features that are visually match the original base. The fabrication of the new features on the matching identical feature from the building where identical features are not present. Base the fabrication on historic drawings for photographic evidence of comparable examples found in a historic building in the neighborhood. So the next slide is the perspective view, and the proposal retains most of the historic materials, including the historic form, historic brick, and majority of the window openings in the cornice. The historic storefront is no longer intact, so the proposal is to install a new storefront reminiscent of what is likely the historical like is likely there historically. The proposal is comparable with the historic building and meets guidelines. The applicant plans to restore the existing brick facade and the cornice following CHAP guidelines. The brick will undergo spot repointing as needed, and the cornice will be repainted along with new materials at the storefront. Next slide. So this was the original look of the storefront. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the next slide, the redesign. So the redesign is more appropriate for staff's recommendation as it fits more of a historical context. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the rear elevation. And at the rear of the building, the west elevation, the proposal is to finish the historic brick and stucco. Given location and history of the alterations at this elevation, the proposal is largely meets the guidelines. Next slide. Staff applied 1.6 doors. So the next slide, please. At the Howard Street elevation, the applicant proposes the retention of the door openings to create a double door. The proposal fully meets the guidelines as the door is functional and utilized as general use. Next slide. At the south elevation, the proposal is to modify the existing non-historic single leaf door located at a historical window opening with removal of the adjacent window to create a double leaf door opening. The proposal meets the guidelines as the new door is located in the existing window opening and was previously modified. Next slide, please. And at the west elevation, at the alley, there is a number of door openings on all three levels. It is unclear how many historic, and as some openings include brick sills and headers, and some do not. So the proposal would remove the existing openings and reconfigure for a new proposal resulting in two doors at the first floor and two single one overs on the second window and third. So the next slide, please. Windows, we applied 1.7. Next slide. So the applicant intends to reuse the majority of the historic window openings and fill with new composite windows at the south elevation. The original brick arches will be maintained. The proposed door at the south elevation requires a removal of two historic window openings at the east elevation, and the window springs will be wood composite painted with a sealed skin, the same material and color SW7675 as the storefront panels. The use of composite windows may be generally appropriate. However, staff will work with the applicant to ensure the windows have the correct jam profile, reveal, daylighting, and opening, and etc. Next slide, please. At the west elevation, I'm sorry. That's just another perspective. We can move on to that next slide. So we applied 1.810 roof decks. Next slide. The proposed roof deck will not be visible from the street and generally meets the guidelines. Plans show on the rooftop space amenity, but there is no railing. Final plan should show a railing and should not be visible from the street. Next slide, please. Lighting. If you go to the next slide, this is a rendered elevation of the south, and the proposal includes integration of 9 sconces along the south elevation between the window bays. More detail is still necessary on these fixtures, but additional lighting along Howard Street still may also be appropriate. Next slide. Staff applied 1.12 signage and awnings. Next slide. This was the original awning that was proposed back in November. Next slide. The applicant has responded to the November motion and changed the canopy to a thinner, more simple design, which is appropriate that does not overshadow the historic building. Next slide. Staff applied 2.4.5 for roofs. Next slide. The proposal generally meets the guidelines. The roof on the building is flat, which is comparable to the majority of the roofs in the immediate vicinity and features a simple cornice at the uppermost level. The roof will house HVAC and other mechanical equipment that is not visible from the street. Next slide, please. So 2.5 is materials and detailing. Next slide. The applicant chose to use aluminum composite material, Akubon Plus, for the cladding and vertical additions. The material will be painted in SW7675 sealskin, the same color as the cornice and throughout the project. Composite wooden panels to match and will be used in the historic spandrels on the east elevation. The new windows are proposed to be Anderson Fibrex wood composite windows, and the applicant proposes to use thermal true fiberglass doors. Next slide, please. That is the composite wood panels painted to match will be used on the historic spandrel on the east elevation. The new windows are proposed to be Anderson, like I mentioned. The actual materials are listed here, but we want to again work with the applicant to figure out what that could be. Because normally we apply wood, aluminum, or clad wood, and maybe composite may not be the best profile for this elevation. Next slide. Staff finds the use of the painted metal and the vertical additions to appropriate. However, more studies should be completed on the material used in the historic renovation. This should include metal spandrels to match the existing aluminum clad windows that can match an historic appearance of the windows. Next slide, please. One more. So the proposed renovation of the historic building generally meets the guidelines. Updates to design include, in response to conditions conceptually approved by commission in November, these redesigns, the canopy, the removal of the cornice on the 4th and 5th floor, removal of the signage on the east elevation, and modification of the east elevation with a more comparable approach, the reduction of the impact of the main entry on the south elevation, where only historic window openings will be modified to allow new front entry, relocation of the amenity space to the first floor for the gym, and we're requiring more information on the fiberglass and the aluminum composite material. Next slide. Staff has some concerns regarding those materials, as I've mentioned before, and we would like to work with the applicant to further the design. And this is a historic shot from 1920, I believe. And as you can see that the details in the east elevation, and we were hoping, or we would like the applicant to try to reproduce more of what is there and save some of the metal glasses that are in the east elevation. So next slide. Recommendation. The staff is recommends approval of the design with the following conditions. Staff does not recommend the use of composite materials on the 2nd and 3rd floor story bay on the historic facade. The applicant should use a material that can be more accurately replicant of the historic design of the bay. Applicant can use physical and photographic evidence to rebuild or create this 2-story bay. The applicant should provide more information on the proposed graphic on the south wall. The applicant should also provide more information proposed on the window spandrel materials, and the applicant should provide more information on the roof deck. Staff recommends that the final details return to staff. And that's the end of this presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Commissioner Renaud. Do you know if one of my concerns is that with the really dark color at the addition on top, it makes the whole thing feel really top heavy, especially because the proportions are funky, although, just because they're building 2 stories over 3 stories. But my question is, do you know if they looked at alternative colors, lighter colors for the top? I think the previous submission had a different color at the top.
Yes, the previous submission was more of a lighter gray color, and I do not know if they looked at others, but that's why we've recommended that they also look at other colors just to verify, kind of separate them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Commissioner Penza has a question as well, and concur with Commissioner Renaud's comment about it being a little bit lighter. I think that would help. But I have a question about the staff's not recommending composite material. Is it because it's a particular composite material, or I guess what is the concern with that?
We don't actually know what the composite material is, and talking with colleagues have stated that doesn't always play over as very well as far as the look concerned in final results. So we're hoping for something that may look better as to define the building as it was.
So you're concerned, you would not be interested in something like a Hardy panel or an AZEC panel? I just want to understand what the concern is.
I think the concerns being expressed is we've got decent photographic evidence of kind of the reveals of the original panels that are up there. And the applicant would need to satisfactorily convince us that they can replicate that profile, because we actually do have some evidence of what it should look like.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Other questions for Anthony? Hearing none, Stacy, you want to invite members of the public to comment on this?
Yes, no, I did message everyone to let them know, but if anyone in the public is interested in testifying, now's your time to either notify me in the chat or to use the raise hand function. But if it's all right, I think I'll let the applicant testify first. He hasn't indicated that he wants to speak, but let's, Mr. Aaron, I'm gonna unmute you. Would you like to speak? Alex Aaron, the applicant.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Stacy, thank you. Commissioners, thank you for your time today. We appreciate your review of our proposal and your feedback. Just to address the 2 points that we heard really quickly, the architects did do a light study, and I'm happy to share that with the staff. We thought that some of the feedback we received that they wanted a warmer color, and all colors are from the historic palette. So we're happy to share the color selections with staff, and if we need to revisit that, we're open to that. With regard to the wood composite, both for the windows and for the east elevation, we work closely with window and door supplier throughout our CHAP projects throughout the city, and this proposed material is what is most suitable or similar to doing wood. It actually is the Anderson, I believe, 100 series, and we sent a PDF thorough packet of detail on that. But again, we're happy to revisit with staff and make sure that we're replicating as best as possible to what historically was there. If anybody has any other questions, myself and I believe the architect is on the call, and we're happy to take that. But thank you for your time.
Commissioners, do I have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Powell. So I think that what we have is like a nomenclature problem. So I think that on the addition on the top, you mentioned like a Luca bond. So that's an aluminum composite material on the top. And then, right, new metal panels. So I heard at some point someone say something. So is that an aluminum composite material, like a panel, like a metal laminated on a phenolic core?
Yeah, and I think there's two type of materials we're talking here. So the aluminum metal, or the paneling for the vertical addition, is different than the wood composite that we are.
Understood. I'm starting at the top and working my way down. So I was confirming that in fact the new metal panel facade, what is that specific material?
Yes. Jimmy, is anybody from Drummond on that can address commissioners a question?
Yes, would you like me to unmute? There's Jimmy Drummond and Michelle Fowler. Who?
Both of them, or Michelle. If it can only be one, I guess you can unmute Michelle.
I can unmute both of them. They both need to introduce themselves. I'm going to mute Jimmy and Michelle, and you're both unmuted. And just before each of you speak, just make sure to introduce yourselves. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Michelle Fowler. I'm an architect with Drummond Projects. And I worked on this project, of course, with Alex and with Jimmy. Just to give a little bit more information on the new addition of facade, we were considering the Luca bond composite metal panel, and you're correct, that is aluminum on a substrate. Composite panel, because it comes, with the insulation as part of the panelized system. And then, as you noted, it's a little bit more of a terminology issue. That the composite material for the new addition, it's a very different system from the composite wood panel that we are using to recreate the historic storefront at the ground level and levels 2 and 3.
Yeah. So thank you. This is Commissioner Powell. So then, we have the metal composite panel at the top, and then we have a wood composite, which we would call maybe AZAC or Bipon or something like that down in the detailing around the historic storefront and the spandrel panels. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And then the third composite material are the windows. And I have not looked up the Anderson whatever 100 series, but I'm assuming that that is probably a fiberglass window. Or what?
Yes, I believe so. Alex, if you want to give more information about the specific window type. But yes, I believe that's correct.
Yeah, apologies. I don't have the PDF in front of me. We did submit it to CHAP staff for this presentation. I can double check and get back to you.
Actually, this is Commissioner Renan. I have the PDF open. It looks like the entire Anderson catalog for this window series, so it's hard to know what you're actually proposing, but in the material component, they call it Fibrex, which is reclaimed wood, polymer fibers, kind of a mix of different, it's a composite. It's a mix of different materials.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Commissioner Powell. Thank you, Commissioner Renan. That's the point I want. Thank you. That I have never worked with that kind of product in a window system before, so I was not aware that there was yet another offering out there.
And we certainly have criteria that need to be met for any alternate material proposals for windows, and we would expect that to be reviewed at least at a staff level to confirm that whatever's being proposed is indeed meeting our alternate window criteria.
Yeah, and then I guess we have down at the ground floor, Commissioner Powell again, smooth fiberglass double doors, so that may be where I started to think about fiberglass. Okay, so I just wanted for everybody to be on the same page.
Commissioner Penza will just add to that. With those windows, I'm not familiar with these Fibrex Anderson windows, but just looking, I'm not seeing a profile that seems to be an historic profile. So I'm not quite sure about that window selection.
And this is Alex.
If the architect can talk about that.
Yeah, this is Alex again, the developer. Again, we specialize in historic restorations. When we approached this project, we went to our supplier and wanted to come up with an alternative to the standard wood or aluminum clad that we've used in the past on our historic projects, simply for the fact that in the event we were to sell the building down the line, what we've noticed is a maintenance issue if you do simply wood, and people are not maintaining that and you have paint peeling or rotten wood. So what we were trying to do was to match the profile as best as possible, and what the supplier recommended was this product, which is correct. It's a blend of materials, but more so for sustainability reasons. And again, this was provided to Caitlin, I think, who was the original sponsor of this project and now handed over to Anthony. But nonetheless, we're happy to work with all staff and review the window selection and the product before any order.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Powell. Is the window painted on site, or is it pre-finished from standard colors, or how's that finish applied?
So the finish would be applied on site.
Thank you.
The catalog, this is Commissioner Renan, the catalog does say it comes factory finished, but that could be an option. I think my sense generally is that, because we got 100 some odd pages of the Anderson catalog as part of the submission, but no actual, finished board or specificity on what these various composites are, the windows, but also the metal panel and the any kind of profile, and then also the wood composite, the AZEC or whatnot, the profile. So I think that's what's really lacking here, which is probably why we're asking all kinds of questions. It's like, what are these things going to look like in their profile? Is there any kind of pattern, or is there any kind of surface modulation or anything like that? So that's just, I didn't see any of that in the submission. So that seems to be eliciting all these questions.
And that certainly seems to be, as we move forward here, part of any motion might well be to have these specific profiles submitted for approval prior to releasing the project. Because I'm scrolling through, same thing. It's 100 pages of catalog, and looks like they can do a lot of things, but there's no indication about what specifically they are proposing to do here. So I would agree with that. Commissioners, do we have any other questions for the applicant or the architects at this point in time?
Commissioner Penza would just recommend whatever window it is, it be pre-finished rather than painted in on site. It'll be a much more durable finish.
That's a good point to note. And I guess since we're kind of going a little off script here, does the applicant or any of the architects associated with the project care to offer any additional commentary here?
No, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Hearing no one else wanting to address at this point, Stacy, is there anyone else signed in who wishes to testify on this matter?
Let me see. We had a comment in the chat, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but Nicole King, you put a comment in the chat. Unfortunately, if you want to testify, you got to testify. So let me, Nicole, Ms. King, would you like to testify about this item?
Yeah, sure. But my name's Nicole. Hi. So my name is Nicole King. I live in Chesapeake Commons, and I can see this building outside of my window right now. And I just wanted to testify that I am excited about this project and its attention to preservation. I think it's such a cool building, and I'm just excited to see it activated as a resident in the area. And thanks for all of your work to make sure that it adheres to preservation guidelines. That's it.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, do you have any questions? Hearing none, thank you for coming out to testify today. Stacy, is there anyone else signed in or anyone else here who would like to address the commission on this matter?
No one else has indicated that they would like to testify. So I guess this is sort of a last call.
So going once, going twice. There being no one else indicating a desire to testify, we will close the public commentary and move to deliberation. Commissioners, where do we stand? Thoughts, notions, motions?
This is Commissioner Renan. I mean, I think it's a nice design. I just think there's some detail lacking, and given that this was supposedly the final review, I'm just wondering if it needs to come back with missing information to the commission as opposed to the staff. But I'm curious to hear what others think.
Commissioner Penza would agree with that. I think there are a couple design things I just want to talk about see what the other commissioners feel. I know that the architect has minimized the residential entry canopy, which is very nice, but it almost feels a little too reduced. I don't know if I feel that strongly about it, but if others think the same, maybe a little bit more beefiness. And also the windows, the last time I looked at Anderson for historic windows, there seemed to be only one, and I can't remember what the name of it was, one line in Anderson that had the profile, acceptable profile for historic work. And unless we're considering this new construction, which potentially it could be, that, again, I want to just bring that to the other commissioners' thoughts. Also, the shape of the windows, it looked like they were rectangular windows put under the shallow arch. I generally like to fill out the entire opening if it's historic, so wanted to get your feel on that.
This is Commissioner Powell. Thank you, Commissioner Pinza, for bringing up the awning. I completely forgot to ask about that because I had no understanding really of what that was, because there were these little white orbs below it, and I didn't know if what those were. So I agree, I don't understand the details around that. As far as the windows, I don't mind that they're rectilinear because it's an arch, it's a masonry arch that's arching to avoid the use, that's serving to create the opening for the window, and then there's pairs of windows underneath them. And so I felt like it's pretty common to see a squared off profile under that kind of paired solution. Although, yeah, I agree with you in other instances, but not this one. I could buy that it was squared off. Well, I wonder, is there an avenue? I think the final comment that we probably want to add into this from an architectural standpoint is we would like to see a color study with the top portion of the building lighter, because I think all the architects agreed that it felt like that might be nicer to strike a dark line and then kind of fade to the sky. But looking at that in a perspective color study in context would be very helpful, because there's a tall building next to it. It's not devoid of context. And I think this is a really important project. This is a great tiny building, and we want to do everything we can to catalyze this project. The building is in terrible condition. I've been in it before. It's time to make it happen. Is there something short of returning to the full commission? Could they meet with the architectural review subcommittee to look at these details so that we don't get delayed the project?
I think technically they would present to staff, and staff could solicit the opinion of the architectural review committee about that. I don't think they have a mechanism for a direct, meeting without staff arranging for it. And if that would be acceptable to the balance of the commission, that might be a very nice compromise. So, other commissioners, well, what do you guys think? Sounds like the motion would be to have final, basic approval, final details returned to staff with review from the architectural review committee. Other commissioners will be ceding final review to the commissioners on the review committee. Does everyone feel comfortable with that?
Yep.
Does anyone feel not comfortable with that? Well, then it sounds like it might be time to craft a motion.
Okay, this is Commissioner Powell. Happy to craft a motion. So the motion would be to follow staff recommendations, kind of. I think it's follow staff recommendations for the approval of the design, but with the following conditions. And that would be that there is a color study done to show the top addition as a lighter color in context to the adjacent building. Bullet 1. Bullet 2 would be to present the details around the second and third story bay, that spandrel. What is it? The east facade. Just call it the east facade. Present further detailing on the east facade. Huh?
The Howard Street facade.
Sure. Thank you. It's also east, I think. And I think the other three bullets should stay, and then we could add a final bullet that would be to provide additional details on the canopy.
Go ahead.
Can I add a friendly amendment to that? I think that for this, what's now the second bullet regarding the composite material at the base, I think it applies to the material of the bay, but also the windows, right? We talked about the composite. Well, actually, that should probably be a whole separate bullet, right? Because this bullet didn't really mention the windows.
I thought that was bullet 4. The applicant should provide more information on the proposed windows and spandrel material.
Okay, that would, well, maybe we just supplement it by saying with a focus on, what's the proposed profile and, the sight lines of the windows.
And a friendly amendment on top of that is that staff recommends that the file details will be returned to staff with input from the Architectural Review Committee. Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right. Eric, can you restate that motion?
I will try. Let me get my glasses on here. So it is follow staff recommendation with approval of design with the following conditions, and that is to present a color study to show a lighter color for the addition, present details of the east facade, parentheses Howard Street facade, provide additional details on the canopy, so further study and additional details on the canopy, and return to staff with input from the CHAP's architectural subcommittee. And I did put on bullet 4 of the staff recommendation, it says the applicant should provide more information on the proposed windows and spandrel material with a focus on profiles and sight lines. That's what I have.
All right. That sounds about right. Do I have a second for that?
I'll second that. This is Commissioner Renan.
We have a motion for Commissioner Powell, a second from Commissioner Renan. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, a vote of aye will be to support the recommendation on the motion on the floor right now. Eric, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Powell.
Aye.
Commissioner Bryant.
Aye.
Commissioner Dennis.
Aye.
Commissioner Penza.
Aye.
Commissioner Renan.
Aye.
Commissioner French.
Aye.
And Commissioner Edwards.
Aye.
All right. The motion
passes.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon. This is Commissioner Bullock, also voting aye.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, great.
All right. So we have it's unanimous. So with that, the motion carries. And with that, there is no further business before this commission. And so therefore, we are adjourned and we will see you next month. Take care.